Welcome to the world of ShadowWest, a dark fantasy western powered by the fast and flexible Shadow Dark system. It's a new vision of our own Wild West. The sun can be cast into darkness for days. An alien mystical ore crashes to the earth during the hours of the bleak. Factions rise trying to control its power. Myths come to life. Strange creatures roam the landscape and dwell in deep, dark mines. But in forgotten gulches and in the ruins of ancient civilizations, great power can be found. You can play as a gunslinger, a scout, a holy roller, a rough cut, range rider, or a mystic. All of these classes, many backgrounds, and unique legacy abilities have been created just for ShadowWest. You'll also find new rules for riding, trains, firearms, and a skill system. You'll also meet a whole host of dangerous and terrifying critters that now walk the deserts and prairies. Get out of the saloon and take a look around. See what is waiting for you in the dark of the Shadow West. Our what may be our final stream as far as the creative aspects and the development aspects of the ShadowWest Kickstarter. So thanks for tuning in live or watching this later over on YouTube. And as always, you can drop by our social media is at Fox and Board Games, and drop by foxandboardgames.com for all of our updates and information as far as our various projects. But let's get to it. So we are on the tail end of the ShadowWest Kickstarter, and we are looking at, I'm just going to share the screen right here. Don't show. I just reinstalled this, so it's giving me all these pop-ups, of course. So let's take a look at this. And did it bring it on? Did it bring it on to the screen? There we go. And this is our current Kickstarter. We are at, including late pledges, 334 backers, $19,839. Thank you very much. Again, beyond and we still are getting pledges beyond what I would have ever imagined this to do in this period of time. So I am thrilled. This, of course, just means, well, we've got a lot of work to do because there's a lot of stretch goals that were met. So we have Brett working on the soundtrack. I'm working on the core material. Then I'll be working on the extended material. And we have Crooked Tail Crafts, who are working on our physical add-ons, such as the dice and the sticker sets and the coasters. Many of those are at prototype level. We're just waiting to go to get the final numbers before production. And we are still offering through Friday. We have closed a lot of the special add-ons, the Kickstarter only add-ons, but you can still get our PDFs and our physical print books and combinations thereof until this Friday at prices that are going to be greatly reduced from retail. Again, even though I work with a domestic factory, which has been fortunate for us, the prices will remain very moderate. Some prices will increase. Hi, Julia. The prices will be the prices on everything game-wise are increasing due to tariffs, as that also affects ink and paper. So we're striving to keep this low. We're striving to keep this very affordable. But these are locked in. These prices are all locked in. Nothing's going to be affected by tariffs as far as the Kickstarter fulfillment. Fortunately, we did that as far as tariff proofing very early on. And the only thing I will say, though, is that this will definitely be a discount from which you will find these products at retail, especially online retail. And we have met several stretch goals. I'll go over that in previous videos. Go check them out at YouTube if you haven't seen them. But we have $19,839. $20,000 is the stretch goal to write a whole new campaign setting or a whole coherent campaign setting for ShadowWest as part of the Kickstarter. That would then be included as an add-on, and the PDF would be available for all backers, all paid backers of the Kickstarter. I intend to do the campaign setting anyway for this. This would just up the time frame on this and give me more work to do in the next couple months. So let's make it happen. We made the soundtrack happen. That was the thing I think we were all really excited about. I got a little bit of previews from Brett over the past month or two, just little things he's working on. Of course, it sounds awesome. There was no doubt in my mind. Again, Brett and I are long-term collaborators on a series of projects and bands and things like that. So this is where we're at with the Kickstarter. Now, a couple things. The Kickstarter fulfillment for the PDF is set for August 2025. And to be completely honest, we have made this thanks to you and the things you have kickstarted and stretch goaled into existence, made this a longer book than what was originally anticipated and more complicated book. So what I intend to do, and before I go on, I'm going to go over this in a few minutes, but the core book is mostly complete. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. When I say that, I mean the writing. I don't mean layout. I don't mean design. I don't even mean a solid proofreading and edit. We are going to be getting to all that. But my intent is to, in the next few weeks, finish off the core text of the ShadowWest rulebook and then drop that to all backers as an unformatted system reference document. And for those of you not familiar with that term, it's done by many major companies, that it is basically just all your core rules, everything you need to play the game without frills, without the art, without the additional flavor text, without a lot of extrapolation on the rules, just so everybody can have a copy of the playable rules set for ShadowWest within the next few weeks. And, this is something we ran into with scheduling this chat. It was completely out of my head that this was the starting week of academia for many of our contributors to this project and Fox and Board Games employees / contractors. And so we are all really bogged down with pre-semester, including myself. We were all really bogged down with pre-semester stuff. And in fact, we were going to try to juggle this to later in the week or tomorrow night. And it just didn't work for anybody. So that's why we're here on a Tuesday night before our semesters start. So I'll be getting everything done as quickly as possible. I'm going to give you some previews of it tonight. The rules are well underway. The rules are deep into play testing. I'm going to say realistically, the formatted version of the books with art, with layout, I'm going to really shoot for October. Now, there are all the additional add-on material, the dice, the coasters, all that stuff. That as it gets done, it will get ready to go into bundles and start shipping as soon as it's all together. Of course, our real goal is to have everything to you by the end of the year. That includes all of your add-ons and all of your special items. We're looking to get it to you sooner. But that's really our main goal, is to have everything ready for, of course, to you. And then anything remaining plus the retail version of the books goes to Philadelphia Area Gaming Expo, page 3. I'll give my friends over at page 3 a little plug. If you're in the Philadelphia area, please go check it out. Several games of ShadowWest. They're already filling up. And so are our Trash Sexy and our other games. But before I get too off tangent for that, I wasn't going to make this a very long stream. And I will guess we'll just go right over to where the project is at and what still needs to be done. Because I think in the long run, that's going to be of the greatest interest to everybody. So let's go back to that share screen tab. And we will stop sharing. The interface has changed a little bit since the last time I was on StreamYard. That's why I was kind of like, where is everything? So select a tab here, share window, and we're gonna go to our. That'd be funny if I shared that. That's That's my private Shadow Dark game that I hope to run a session of this weekend. Either my character notes or my game notes for that are up here too. That'd be rather amusing because it's rather raw and rather silly. So here's the ShadowWest outline. If we could bring that on screen. For some reason, it's not bringing these things right on screen when I present. Thank you. I don't know why it's not just bringing it automatically on screen. It historically did that for me. It's not doing it for me tonight. Who knows? Detective. I'm going to pull this down here. So this is my basic outline that I've been working on as I write for the game. And at this time, I'll also talk about the play tests. We have had 3 really solid play tests of the game, 3 entirely different groups. One group, I didn't know anybody except for one player sitting down at Dex Lake. The other play test with Lisanne Lake and Alan Reed's group, I knew about half the people. That was an online play test. And the remaining play test was with my core group, all people who I've played with for quite a long time. So where I'm at with this is really, if I were to break this down to progress sections, I am pretty much exactly here. I'm done with the first 2 pages, and that includes your kind of exposition. That includes your characters, building your characters. That includes Facebook has lost connection. Okay, Facebook issues. Boy, I'm shocked. Let me tell you that. Sorry for anybody on Facebook. And we have the magic section is done. The playing the game section is done with rules, some of the new rules, the game master section. The core of it's mostly done. How to allot experience, how to create compelling NP, how to create stories in ShadowWest and how they differ from traditional Shadow Dark or traditional fantasy-based games. And we are kind of right up to here. And it's very convenient that it ended up being in that section. So this is the last of the real writing I have to do. So that's I'm going to say it's not a lot. I have to write up all the monsters. Okay, yes, that's a lot. The politics of the time, towns and settlements. So a lot of this is going to be behind the scenes game master stuff, settler mode. So the gauntlet in this game is called settler mode. You all play settlers instead of 0 level characters. I mean, you are 0 level characters. So the settler mode starts you out in some situation like the Oregon Trail. You might have died of dysentery. You know what I mean? Like you're basically just like farmers or whatever. And, wolves attack your farm. Whoever survives the wolves attacking the farm gets to become level 1 characters. That's a brief preview of settler mode. It's kind of entertaining. And to be honest, I have not tested settler mode yet. And I'll talk a little bit more about upcoming play tests. So I have to write up the rules for settler mode, though I have them all kind of in note form. I haven't actually set them up in terms of a real structure yet. And then I have the landscapes, which is a little bit about the world, a little bit more about the world, towns and settlements, how to handle towns and settlements, politics of the time, what's going on in the world. And then I get to critters and strange things, which are your monsters and magic items. Then strange places. A part of this game is, in fact, that certain areas have power. And that's something I'm going to talk a little bit about. Factions and cults actually play a pretty significant part in the Old West, the real Old West, and also in ShadowWest. And for those who have played Hellhound Trail, you meet another faction there. You meet one of the factions there. And then I'm going to do Hellhound Trail, the scenario I've been running, which is the level 1 intro scenario, which, again, seems pretty complete. I've been tweaking a few things every time I run it, but it's pretty much at the point I think I'm going to be writing it up. And it'll be in the book, and then Into the Sunset, which is your closing. Now, the main thing I really still have to do, the main amount of work, I mean, this is maybe a week's worth of work right here, writing all that up, a week of dedicated work, which, of course, now the semester's starting, is going to be different in terms of eking it out, but we'll be doing our best. We have a ton of tables we still have to do, because as we know, part of what makes Shadow Dark so popular and has made it so famous are all its random generation tables. So that way you can kind of create things right off the fly. And I'm going to try to keep that as alive and as inherent to ShadowWest as it is to Shadowdark. I've got some of these done. I've got the Ornex mishap table done. I've got a couple random adventure table. I've got a couple of random encounter tables done, as has been relevant for the playtest. Whispers from the Sky is underway. That's kind of the best, the most fun, I think, because that draws in kind of the cosmic horror elements of it. But what happens if you're around Ornex too long? Things start getting strange for you. So one of the play tests, I had a person draw some pretty astute conclusions between Ornex Skyfalls and certain famous cosmic horror stories, which was kind of interesting. And he and his group were the first ones to kind of pick up on it. I'm like, yeah, you might be onto something there. So I'm looking forward to getting that rolling. So the core book's almost done. What else has to be done? So we need to get the Skycaller character class, which you voted into existence with your backing of this project. So you only have yourselves to thank for extending the timeline on this, because it will appear in the core book, or maybe it'll appear as a supplemental pamphlet at the end of this book, kind of a cursed scroll, right? Maybe it'll appear in the first issue of the zine, the dime store novel adventure. And maybe the characters, maybe the Skycaller will appear there. But they will be available to all backers, as was promised, in digital form at any rate. And print. So I guess, yeah, I would include it as maybe a separate pamphlet. We'll see how quickly it gets done. But the Skycaller character class. Now, the Skycaller is touchy because it doesn't really fit into anything else. It's the most native. Not native in terms of indigenous person, but native in terms of organic to the theme of ShadowWest. There, you totally need to ShadowWest, and I have to be a little careful with not making them too specific, but also not making them too overpowered. I have the Entertainer, and the Entertainer is fine. The Entertainer is very much like the Bard of Shadowdark, and I hadn't really read the Bard yet, except maybe to glance over it. And I'm writing up some thoughts on the Entertainer, and I went out to the Bard, and I'm like, well, I guess I don't have to do a lot, because this is kind of exactly what I was thinking the Entertainer would do. So that's going to be your Bard class. So you're getting your Bard class. The Skycaller is probably most closely going to resemble a Warlock from Cursed Scroll 1 in function, similar to your 5th edition and 4th edition D&D Warlocks, in that it's a caster, but not really. Like, it can cast magic spells, but they do so through a method that is non-traditional. And they're working with the Ornex and with the Bleak, is effectively their patron. That's kind of how I've decided I'm probably going to frame it. And I think it's going to be pretty cool now that I've got it a little bit more nailed down. So, but that still has to be written up, honestly. Those haven't been tested yet. So the other thing that has not been tested yet, Saggy's Dime Store novel, it's 5 different adventures. And we are going to have adventures hopefully from settler level all the way up to high range, 9 to 10 for ShadowWest, 9 to 10. So I have a group that's going to be doing a progressive playtest of levels. We're not going to be playing every single adventure. We're going to be testing characters at different levels. So that's going to take probably a couple months, to be quite honest. So that's going to push back Saggy's a little bit. Again, we're still aiming to get it all towards the end of the year. And all these adventures are going to be meant to be played in more or less 1 or 2 sessions. So it's not like I have months of playtesting ahead of me. I have maybe 6 weeks of playtesting after I get the characters and after I get these scenarios really set for those levels. And, so again, I'm looking at probably getting everything for Saggy's done October, November, which I think is a fairly realistic goal. The one thing this has taught me is that when the project gets this big, everything does take longer than what it should. But the key is to just keep working on it. And I've gotten through most of it this summer, except for some of these kind of extra pieces. So that's where the project really is kind of hanging around at. I guess we'll do some previews. Do some previews of the content. And again, none of it's been formatted yet. This is all still just raw text form. And let me pull that out of the files. I don't know how many people we have live tonight, but if you are live, it appears Facebook unfortunately went down. If you're over at YouTube and you have questions, of course, ask questions or jump in. I expected this to be a kind of a quiet stream, low-key stream, and that's okay. And where are we at? ShadowWest chapters. So I'll pull up the magic section because that's the kind of thing I think a lot of people become interested in. Francois, hello. Oh, very cool. Hello, Francois. Nice to see you. And we'll see you at page 3. Perfect. I'm excited to run it at page 3. And it's going to be so refined by then. The people who have been playing it up until now have been kind of helping me play test and piece together. The books should be available at page 3. You know, I'm really pushing to get that out, the core book at least. And Blind Bard, hello. Nice to see you. Yes, we'll see you at page as well. Good to see you. Glad I have some people watching because I can't see a viewer count. I'm like, I might just be talking to myself, but that's okay too. Not like I don't do that enough anyway, like everyone else. So let's look at the magic a little bit. Just give you a couple little previews here. I'm really excited to get the monsters started. I have quite a few of them written up in kind of, you know, note form, but to really nail them down, stat them out, and throw them at players and see how horrible the situation really gets. You know, certain creatures I have a feeling are going to be much, much scarier than I believe. Let's see if we could share the current. Yep, thank you. Again, I don't know why it's not automatically sharing. That's really annoying. That's a StreamYard thing. So here we are. So magic, the real core of magic for me in ShadowWest was the framing of it and how it's different from Shadow Dark, and it functions exactly the same way. You know, I actually got a reply from Kelsey on the Facebook group because I put a note up saying, so about the formatting of this. Hey, Play With That Ego, what's going on? How are you? Yes, you're gonna like scary. Your group's gonna be the beta test of the scary, the core group as the level progression plays. Like, how bad is a jackalope? How bad is a horn-toed dragon? How scary are these things? Ooh, that was bad. So that's the joy of one shots, though, that you're like, okay. So I'm glad since you're on, I'm glad I didn't actually accidentally pull up the notes for this weekend like I almost did. That would have been really humorous. So magic, the way magic's going to work, of course, the biggest difference in magic is framing it. And how do you frame it in the Old West? And as I've mentioned before, I framed it in terms of holy roller spells are the cleric spells, are your holy roller spells, and they are effectively granted by a deity that exists in a religion in our world. They're pretty Judeo-Christian in nature. They are actually very Judeo-Christian in ShadowWest and Shadow Dark, as they were in the original version of D&D. It had a very Holy Roman Empire Templar feel to it, you know, warrior monk feel to it. So I kind of kept that, and I kept the Holy Roller. And by the way, Play With That Ego, Tom is on. He played the Holy Roller. I did increase the power of the brimstone of the wrath for the holy rollers to make it a little bit more attractive, just a tiny bit. And I redid the character, and Blake was right on this, that redoing the character actually really helped. Like, the class itself wasn't as problematic as that playtest character. But what's funny is when Alan played it next, he just didn't, but he still very much plays first edition D&D. So he kind of was like, oh yeah, this guy's actually pretty powerful, which is so funny that people coming from different gaming reference points and what they're looking for in a game really respond differently to different classes. But anyway, the Holy Roller spells, most of them are identical to cleric spells. There are a few differences and a few new ones that make more sense for the Old West setting. In Penance and ShadowWest, you have to perform an act of mercy, and depending on how egregious your blasphemy was when you were trying to cast the spell is how long you have to spend and how much minimum cost of your penance, such as giving to the poor or helping build a new church, which again, you can handle that downtime or whatever. You can also engage in flagellation. I figure this would fit the real world Judeo-Christian notion, especially kind of the Old West brimstone preacher. You can wear a hair shirt or flagellate yourself, or do some kind of duration of suffering to to give yourself penance if you don't want to spend your money and time spending time among the sick and ministering to them. Now, I'm keenly aware that this has overtones of self-harm, and I really wanted to be careful of that. Now, I handled everything and phrased everything because, as we know that from historical examples of, let's say, religious self-mutilation, and by the way, it's not just Christian. I don't really want to talk too much about this openly, but a friend of mine who was in Iraq witnessed an ascetic Islamic or pseudo pre-Islamic Middle Eastern sect where they engaged in extremely severe forms of physical penance. And, in the middle of a war zone, he was like, okay, this is crazy. Like it was like to that degree. And there are some other references. And of course, there's a lot of mystic cults that have engaged in this kind of behavior to a really kind of extreme degree. So I wanted to really make sure and make this clear that this was not advocating self-harm in any way outside of a fantasy religious pseudo-historical context. So that's how we handle mishaps. Your mishaps. Now, your mishaps in the world. Now, mystics are different than your wizards to some degree. Your mystics are they gain their magic power from finding old scrolls, old tomes, being part of a secret lodge, all these kind of late 19th century, early 20th century trappings of occultism. So it's less, I'm casting a fireball and I'm waving my hand and a fireball appears. To do that, you would have had to have learned it from some sort of text or from some sort of ancient source that has been recovered. Now, functionally, you just learn your spells as you learn your spells. You don't have to do all this to learn spells at new levels. But you can actually learn more spells from different sources than you can in the basic Shadow Dark game. But mystic mishaps are pretty much handled by the wizard on the wizard's table. And I will be modifying that. I will be including some variation of that in the core book. Like I said, the tables and random charts are not anything that I have really. That's the one thing that I haven't really sat down and started to hammer out. I want to get all the narrative text done first. And the exception to this is when Ornex is employed. When Ornex is employed in a spellcast, now Ornex is the magical ore that falls from the sky during the bleak. And when you cast with Ornex, you get an advantage. So if you have a mishap while casting with advantage, that means you've rolled 2 1s. Now, any of us who have gamed long enough, absolutely know this can happen. But when that happens, you go to the Ornex mishap table, which is pretty bad because you're essentially playing with an energy of this ore that came from somewhere else. And this is where a couple people have made comments and drawn relationships between this and a couple famous works of cosmic horror. And the last person who made the comment to me during the last playtest I ran, I was like, you might be on to something. So those are pretty bad. I think they're going to be really fun because they should not happen regularly. But if they do, they do. It'll be an interesting thing. Here's the spells, the spell lists. Here are some of the new spells. And in this chart, I talk about what spells replay, where to find everything in the original Shadow Dark book. And again, you need the Shadow Dark book to play this version of the game. And that's actually what I got the note from from Kelsey about, because I had posted to the one forum and I said, hey, so I'm here writing this book and I need to know, like, how are we referencing things? Like how are we, like how much of the original book should appear in a supplement text? And she actually responded. She's like, just so you know, this is exactly what the license covers. So you should just reference page blah blah Shadow Dark book and then describe what's different in your game. And I was like, okay, cool. I was like, that's great. That's all I got from the source, from the person who wrote the original game and held the license. Because of course I also had a collection of enthusiasts giving me advice that I clearly knew was not correct. So I'm glad someone who actually is involved in the development of Shadow Dark, wrote the book on Shadow Dark, stepped in, jumped in and said, by the way, guys, this is actually how it's supposed to work. Because I was like, good. Now I have no gray area. Now I can't accidentally get in trouble. I said, hate to publish this stupid thing and then get a note from Arcane Library like, by the way, you weren't supposed to quote that in this book. After I've sent out 300, backer copies. So some other cool things that are going on that are a little different in Magic. Charms, amulets, tomes, and relics. Charms and amulets function like scrolls and wands, but tomes and relics are more powerful. Tomes are those magic, arcane, thick, occult books that contain spells. And from these books, your mystics can learn new spells that are permanent retention. Not just casting it off a scroll. You can actually use these books and increase your spell list. And it's not easy. It's not easy. And if you fail, you fail. And if you mishap, then the spell is gone from that tome. And if you succeed, the spell is gone from that tome. So one person can't pass around it and you have, dozens of people learn it. There are relics for the Holy Rollers. And these are, as I say here, it could be a lock of Saint's hair if it's a Catholic Holy Roller, or if it's a Taoist priest, it may be a dragon's egg, a jade dragon's egg. And each relic holds the power of one spell, and they can cast it. And they can also add it to their current spell list. But if they have a mishap, the relic becomes corrupted. They have to seek penance. So that's kind of a little preview of where the magic is different. Let's see if there is another preview I want to hit you guys with before the end of this stream. I guess your basic rules, because I've gone over characters quite a bit. No, I'll show off the gear list. How about that? I'll show off the starting gear list. That's what everyone really wants, their gear list, right? So, and I also haven't had people make characters from scratch and play this extensively, and that's going to be going on with the extended playtest. And let me just present, share screen. Okay, all right, that came right on. All right, so here's starting gear, and here's your settler starting gear. You like with Shadow Dark's funnel mode with the gauntlet mode. You start with a couple random pieces of equipment, and you start with no real class. You start with a couple skills, and and I have this fairly well detailed. Now there was a lot more to take into account. For example, the first playtest of Dynamite proved to be extremely unbalanced. Extremely unbalanced in the sense that the players were able to do this massive effect that was Play Without Ego, do this massive amount of damage very quickly. And of course, they ended up rolling a mishap and doing a massive amount of damage to themselves, which was okay too. But I decided to scale Dynamite back a little bit. Shotguns, I scaled back a slight bit. Not much. But anyway, I went really detailed with this. I did a lot of research on gear. Not only on gear, but things like lodging and dining services, professional services. Like, what if you want a gunsmith? What if you want a gunsmith to customize a gun? what if you want a gunsmith to make a gun to take to, let's see, do I have it here or do I have it listed somewhere else? Take to a Ornex armorer to turn it into a magic gun, right? So I had to think about all those things. It was a little bit different in terms of what I was thinking about in gear versus the more basic Shadow Dark. Now, I'm keenly aware part of the elegance of Shadow Dark is the limited gear list, the ease of play, the very few choices to make for a quick playing game. I did decide to include a lot of choices, but I did not even go as nearly deep into this as I could have, like, let's say, with Old West firearms. Like, anybody who has studied it even a little bit knows that for every gun that was called a Peacemaker, there were maybe 5 different variations from 3 different companies that had these slight variations in make and range. I did not get into all that. It's not a tactical Old West simulation. It's a role-playing game that's supposed to be fast and fun and action-oriented, which, by the way, it delivered in every playtest, which is the thing I was most happy about. But I did have to think about transport, right? I do have rules for trains. I do have rules for mounted combat, for lack of a better word. I know there was a little bit of that touched upon in one of the Cursed Scrolls, but I had to take into ideas of chases, like a horse chase, or a horse is trying to catch up to a stagecoach or a train. I did have to put in a few basic rules for that. There is, and here I do have, did I include that here for transport? Of course, yeah, of course. Transport and animals. I had to include some rules for that. I mean, look at this. I should just so I could see what's going on. Let's move this down here. Hello from Quebec. You are still in Quebec. I didn't realize you were still in Quebec. Hello, Lisanne. Hope you are having fun in Quebec. It's fun. Montreal's a fun city. I was there a number of years ago. See Wardruna, the mighty Wardruna. And to do a couple days of just sightseeing. And that was a lot of fun. Except everybody came home with the flu. That wasn't fun. But anyway. What else do we have here? Armor is very limited in this game. You have denim, thick wool. You have leather and hides. I do give info for archaic metal armor. But I'd really love to see somebody walking through the Arizona desert in chainmail. That would be great. In fact, I do have a little notation that you will take damage and you will eventually die. Oh, you're from Quebec. Oh, cool. Very cool. So you'll come down to Page from Quebec. That's great. We went to a great game cafe in Quebec. I don't remember which one. It was a game coffee shop. They might have had beer too. I don't recall. There was a nice game store. We went to a really nice board game, primarily board game. They had some RPG stuff. I don't remember the names of any of them. It was about 7 years ago, but it was fun. Let's see, cannons. I do have rules for cannons and Gatling guns. These are not things your player should be toting around with ease and frequency. They are as devastating as you could imagine. You don't want to get hit by a Gatling gun or a cannonball. And it was that kind of tension, like action movies, heroic fantasy games have given us this illusion as to how quickly a person can recover from injuries from a weapon and how much damage they can actually withstand from a weapon. And one of the most fun things about running, say, Call of Cthulhu is the first time somebody with like a 45 caliber handgun a player character gets shot by one or shoots somebody else with one, and they're like, wow, they're like dead or almost dead from one shot. I'm like, yeah, that's kind of how guns work. Like, we have this delusion from TV that someone gets shot in the leg and they're walking around the next day, or they get shot through the stomach and they're like chasing bad guys the next day. Like, that's not how it works. And so that was my decision with the firearms rules. I kept them about equivalent to weapons in Shadow Dark, where your average is D6. And then you go up from there. And again, a third level character might only have 15 hit points in Shadow Dark or 18 hit points in Shadow Dark. So this idea of, a 31 to 36 caliber revolver doing D6 they might be able to get hit 2 or 3 times if there's no critical roll, and they are down for the count. Whereas if they get hit by the shotgun that does, 2d6, 1d6, and 1d4, and I did tone that down. So I made that. I won't get into the specifics, but one shot from it was originally doing 4d6, and it was honestly just too much. What else? As I said, I have this really extensive equipment list for the sake of completion. And I did this not only because I love researching costs of things and timelines and historical aspects, but I did this because I think players also have to have an idea of what it was like living then. Like when their character makes $1 to go on like a rescue mission, and the realization to buy that Peacemaker they want, it's going to cost them $15. I think they had to, and I think Shadow Dark does a really good job of this as well. And that like chainmail's really expensive to start. Like your first level characters generally don't start with chainmail, or they may if you have a generous DM. But I think that's one thing that Shadow Dark did that was really nice, is that it made you realize, one, that medieval combat kind of sucks. Like getting hit with a sword, even if you think you're really tough, getting hit with a sword or an axe kind of sucks. And this idea that you're going to be walking around in plate mail at second level and be immune to damage is like right out the window. So I tried to keep kind of that same feel for ShadowWest. I went kind of like, it's funny, like halfway through the adventure, Lisanne was like, none of us have coffee. Like we would definitely have coffee. And I said, well, there happens to be a 1 pound of coffee on the list, because again, if you follow actual Westerns, you know that things like having coffee and bacon and jerky and all those things, those were like real staples. A bag of dried beans, like no cowboy went without these, no rustler went without these. So I decided to keep all that stuff in the equipment list, even though that's kind of this very like simulationist, non-Shadow Dark way to approach gear. I don't expect people to go buy pounds of butter and fill their gear slots with them. I think that would be kind of funny, but I thought it might be interesting for people to get an idea of how what things cost, and why most of the West was actually very poor. Unless you were rich, you were very poor. And I kind of wanted to play that up that paradigm a little bit in the development of the setting. I didn't want to necessarily make this so fantastic that there was a disconnection. In fact, the one comment I got from one player is you kept some things to a degree that it's really realistic. Like you're calling it a fantasy, but some of these things, such as the social climate, the geography, it's not like Deadlands, for example, which I love, that completely reshapes the continent. Like there's these catastrophes created by the conjuring of the Manitou, and by this kind of supernatural occurrences that reshapes the continent. It turns it into much more of a fantasy landscape. I thought it made sense with ShadowWest to keep it a grittier, kind of real version of our Old West, where some weird stuff was happening and your characters had some additional abilities and you were larger than life, but you weren't modern D&D or even maybe Deadlands or World of Darkness level of power beyond your normal character, your normal person out there walking around. But you're not quite as trouble-prone and frail as a Call of Cthulhu character in the Old West. Because as I've mentioned during these feeds, I do run down darker trails too. And even in that, I pad the characters a little bit to make them a little tougher, because when a person's playing the Old West, they want to get into a gunfight. They want to jump on a horse and chase a bad guy. Like if I make characters so frail that they're going to get killed instantly doing that, then it's not going to be a fun game. And I mostly really wanted this to be a fun game. I think that's where we're going to, if anyone has any comments or questions, please do hit me up. And as I said, at the top of the show, we have the Kickstarter open until Friday. Friday, it's start of the holiday weekend here in the United States. And at the end of Friday evening, we will be closing down the late pledges. That's the word. I'm like, advanced pledges, extended late pledge. We'll be closing on the late pledges. And that will be the end of basically the pre-order. And then we're going to start heavy into production mode. We're going to go into production mode within the next week or two. I hope to have the rest of this text pretty much in place to start going to the proofreader, to start going for. Oh, yeah. And so I see the banner coming along here. So as I said, I've been doing playtests of this. I will be setting up some playtests on Start Playing Games. And they will be the one shot that I've been running. So if you're going to play the page, don't sign up. If you are a backer, a Kickstarter backer, you will have access to it for free. And if you're on my Patreon.com/FoxandBoardGames, which admittedly is not the most developed Patreon. I know, I'm one person. I try to drop stuff there on the slide to give people some goodies. But one of the goodies will be, if people want to jump on and play test, it will be a free play test. Or a free play session of ShadowWest, preview session of ShadowWest. If you've backed the game at any level, you'll be able to jump in and play a game for free before the material is all live. And you'll also then have access to some of the pre-play test material, some of the documents I'm showing you here, as an addition to that. So I'll keep everybody posted on that. Keep an eye on our social media. Keep an eye on the Kickstarter campaign. Keep an eye on the Patreon, if you're a Patreon member, for all that information. And as I said, hopefully within the next 2 weeks, I'm going to cross the fingers, I'll be dropping the system reference document version of the rules for backers, for Kickstarter, for all Kickstarter backers, so that you have the document. You can start playing ShadowWest. At least in a basic form. You won't have the art yet. You won't have the graphic design yet. That's all coming. And those are all a lot of moving parts, and by a lot of people who are very busy. So we're going to get that all done as soon as possible and get you the completed versions. But I'm hoping within the next couple of weeks to at least have a PDF for you to download or to just grab right offline and for free. And you could just start looking over the rules, looking over the game, playing the game, and giving me feedback as I continue to play test over the next couple months. So thank you all very much for tuning in. And thanks for your support. The banner came up before I said it. If you have any questions in terms of the game, any thoughts, give me a shout here. You can always send me a note. Games at Fox and Board Games is usually the best way to get me. Fox and Board Games at foxandboardgames.com. That's the one I check the most for any business related stuff. So we're off. We're off and running. Thank you all very much.